A reading from Mark, chapter 11, verses 1 through 11. When they were approaching Jerusalem, at Bethphage and Bethany, near the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately as you enter, you will find tied there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you doing this?' just say this, 'The Lord needs it, and will send it back here immediately.'" Then they went away and found a colt tied near a door outside in the street. As they were untying it, some of the bystanders said to them, "What are you doing untying the colt?" They told them what Jesus had said, and they allowed them to take it. Then they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed them were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest." Then he entered Jerusalem and went into the temple. And when he had looked around at everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. Roller coasters occasionally pull some sleight of hand. Rather than slinging you around at velocity, they might bring you to a precipice. And instead of charging over it, the coaster will drop you backwards down the hill that you just ratcheted up. The fake out and change in direction catches you off guard. It can feel like a gut punch. The top was in sight, and now you're plunging backwards, back into deep darkness, and away from the light. Theme park rides apply this effect for a thrilling surprise. When life drops you backwards just before reaching the top, the results feel far less pleasurable. In the summer of 2018, I became the lead pastor of Grace Church in Palestine, Texas. The first year or so of that experience was particularly traumatic. I've described it in other places as getting dumped 150 times in 6 months, with a good chunk of the dumpers explaining why I bore the blame for the breakup. Meanwhile, I spent my almost every waking hour trying to lead the church back to some semblance of health. However, by the end of 2019 and early 2020, things looked largely positive. We felt like by that point, potential leavers had done their leaving. A bunch of new folks had arrived. I spent much more time talking with people wanting to join than people wanting to blame me for their leaving. We could start focusing more on giving folks a deep and fulfilling church experience, rather than clawing something back from the brink. We'd even finally figured out the Wi-Fi password, which inexplicably had gotten lost in the turmoil. Certainly, by February of 2020, I specifically remember feeling like the top was just in sight, that we'd finally gotten up the hill. The minute someone drops the words February of 2020 into a conversation, you know what happens next. The COVID lockdowns of March 2020, the uneven reopenings of the summer of 2020, and the overall politicalization of COVID response dropped us backwards right down the hill at incredible speed. Seeing what remained after things opened back up felt worse for me than the lockdown. During that season, we simply fought as hard as we could to keep folks connected, and I grew the best/worst beard of my life. Standing in an emptier church, after the battle of the lockdown, and the previous 18 months of hell to get the church to a healthier place, nearly took the fight completely out of me. Starting nearly over again, in the brave, new, post-COVID world, felt like an unimaginably difficult lift. The coaster had dropped us right back to the bottom. The disciples go on their own backwards roller coaster plummet from Palm Sunday to Maundy Thursday. As Jesus triumphantly enters Jerusalem, the disciples must have thought that they had it made. Sure, Jesus had been hinting that he would have to die before his actual victory, but maybe that was just a metaphor or something. He said a lot of things in parables. Perhaps dying meant something different than stopping living? People crowd the streets as Jesus enters Jerusalem victoriously, like a mockery of one of those Roman parades. This same crowd shouts, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest," as it says in Mark 11:9b. They get it! They had crested the hill, and maybe now the Messiah would just reign and set all things right. Thursday night into Friday morning rapidly propels them backwards to the bottom of the hill. In the course of 18 hours, Jesus goes from teaching at dinner to being betrayed by one of his friends, taken into custody, violently mistreated, put on show trial, and let down by that Hosanna shouting crowd, changing their tune to "Crucify him, crucify him." By the disciples' reaction to the events, we see illustrated their emotions crashing backwards down the roller coaster. They flee, they hide, they deny, they doubt, they cower. The victory, once so imminent, now looks impossible. Jesus lived this same series of events as a fully human actor. Unlike the disciples, he knew what he faced that week: the joy of acceptance, the pain of betrayal, and the ignominy of death. Still, we know that it all affected him. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he wrestles with what's before him. His divinity never replaces his humanity. Christ seems to feel the gut-wrenching roller coaster dropping backwards rapidly away from a secure plateau. The incarnation, Christ's earthly life, serves as an act of divine empathy. An omnipotent and omniscient God does not know the pain of a sudden reversal. That experience lies in the human domain. In entering fully into human life in the person of Jesus Christ, God chooses to suffer fully alongside us, creating a new avenue for the divine-human relationship. When a teenager shouts at their parents, "You don't know what it's like," that teenager simply misunderstands the reality. The parent in the situation were, by definition, once teenagers themselves, and in time, the young person will benefit from their parents' experience. But how could a God, wholly other from us, know the feeling of grabbing defeat from the jaws of victory? In living the particularly painful experience of Jesus' earthly life, God does. And it broadens the ways that we can understand God's love and empathy for us. God does know what it's like. And so we can know that God's love can permeate our own moments of devastation when the roller coaster drops backwards away from our hopes. Pain, depression, devastation tend to isolate us. It does that to me. I can fall in the trap of believing that no one knows the depth of my suffering. I felt that way looking at a decimated church that we had already given everything to build back up. Christ's journey from near victory to torturous demise, from Palm Sunday to Good Friday, put the lie to that. We always have someone who can understand our own pit, made that much more painful from having glimpsed the mountaintop. God knows. God's been there. God will be there for us and with us always.